and NGOs looking at it and using it a different way would somehow be diluted. So ICON is an interesting organization. I'm not going to talk a lot about it except to say that it truly is multi-stakeholder governance, and most of its collaborative projects focus on some aspect of communication. Maybe not to the wide audiences you all think about, but some important audiences. There's a lot of different activities it does. One of the things it has is a big database and knowledge base of the abstracts of all the papers in the area. And it's also international in its focus. So one of the things we've started to do a lot more of, and this is actually at the request of the technical community, folks who are doing toxicology and exposure studies, is to begin to background papers. So this is one of our first backgrounders on a paper that linked nanoparticles to fibrillation of proteins. That, unfortunately, from a risk communication point of view, fibrillation of proteins is definitely causal or has been linked to diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, lots of neurodegenerative diseases. So the paper was a hot potato, to put it in the terms of its author, Kenneth Dawson. So he came to us and we wrote a commentary in PNAS. So this is an example of a communication process which really wasn't ICON, although vetted by ICON, which was really directed more towards somewhat journalists, but really the academic community in this particular context. Probably one that is more examples of what we'll do in the future, although that backgrounder was an interesting one, was another one now from Ken Donaldson in Scotland, who's linked single-wall, multi-wall nanotubes to mesothelioma, another hot potato kind of paper. So in this one, we really struggled with what to do. We decided, because it was such a controversial paper, that the information we provided, which was picked up by, in fact, we were the top Google hit on this paper for a long time. We went and interviewed lots of different people who were familiar with this paper. We posted their interviews online. We gave backgrounders. We have some very cool graphics and animation that went up, which did get picked up by the media. We're finding the inclusion of graphics in these backgrounders makes it much more probable that we'll get whatever message we have out. But what we found was very useful is that earlier in ICON, trying to get consensus on even the technical backgrounders was impossible, because people from the different stakeholder groups see very different things in writing. So this worked because we went to these attributed interviews. And then so we were saying to people, if you want to spend 5 minutes and know what's going on with this paper, our website's the place to go. This is not public communication. This is a relatively narrow set. But it's one example of an attempt to be neutral, to provide a forum for different points of view, and to also hopefully give some technical information that could be useful. This is about as close as ICON has strayed into policy, and this is an ongoing activity. In fact, the Good Wiki is going to be launched pretty soon. We've had a historical interest in occupational safety and workplace safety. We have NIOSH and other international occupational organizations who are in ICON to help with this. We did a survey of what people already do. We call it current practices, not best. Right now, we're starting a Good Wiki, which will help, in fact, already has loaded a number of international documents on, hey, you work with nanoparticles, what should you be doing? And that Good Wiki will be a living document, helps people sort out differences they might have between the specific mask they might be using. And that wiki will probably go live. That's the question, is how public we can make it, and there's some legal issues. But this organization, the group that's doing this, typical volunteer group, lots of different folks. That's about as far as ICON can stray into policy. So in that pipeline I showed you, these kinds of organizations can maybe get to the point of collecting and organizing information. And we try very hard not to frame it, because if we did frame it, our people wouldn't let us get it out there, is what we've discovered. So by having a multiple stakeholder group, it keeps us back away from policy. Hopefully keeps us neutral, although that's a very tall order, I've discovered. So really, I think what I wanted to just convey is a little bit about proactive risk research and how that can be very different, or I think it should be different. It's my opinion. A little bit about safety by design, how we use those principles, and what we think that they're going to mean for the community. And finally, sort of the ICON approach to communications, which, as I said, is not hitting all audiences, and it's certainly not going as far as perhaps people will need it to, but at least it's a start. And I just wanted to sort of say my goal in all of this, so you guys can tell me if it's not the right goal. I really want to make sure there's a lot of values, and I really enjoyed the talks today because they clarified in my own mind the fact that how people perceive the value of emerging technology has a lot to do with their personality, the country they live in, their religion. So I can't change those values debates. But it's incredibly important to me, for obvious reasons, that the science that enters into those debates be at the highest possible level and the most current available, and that the science not get hijacked and twisted, as it is very easy to do right now. And that there are ways of doing that, but you have to be extremely careful about the platform you build to do that from. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for sticking around. I know it's late. I thanked most of my folks during the talk, but I just wanted to thank David for advice. I put this up during the during this. And also Dr. Kristen Kalinowski, who's the director of ICON, who's really been a big contact for both this community and others. And I'd be happy to chat with you over dinner or take any questions.
Go, Jenna.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your talk, Vicki. I also, as you pointed out, believe that you know, with all the uncertainty in risk assessment, risk research, that there is no such thing as no framing, and that science is socially constructed in a sense, even by scientists. And so I'm wondering, you know, sitting through the talks today, how did you feel about the distinctions between objective and subjective risk and more empirical-based communication versus framed communication as a scientist? How did you feel about that?
I think the framing is absolutely critical. It happens. It happens when you sell your research as a widget maker. You frame it and then it's going to save the world and cure cancer. I mean, that's a framing, right? Yes. You understand it? So that's just what we do. If you only got 2 minutes, if you have an elevator message, you're framing because you don't have enough time to make your point. So yeah, we do it. I'm not bothered at all, and scientists need to know how to do it better to keep our discipline alive. I'm there. I think what I felt today, and I tried to shadow that a little bit with my own personal experience, is that I don't know how much studies have been done of scientists or toxicologists, whoever it is that creates the information that may or may not matter, because one of the arguments of a lot of your talks is, hey, it doesn't actually matter what the technical data says. So, but if you let me believe that it does, I'd like to believe it does. Then I think that one of the things I found was that there is a huge difference between toxicologists and nanotechnologists. They just have, you know, for obvious reasons, extremely different ways of viewing their technology and what that means. So I was, as sort of somebody who's been in both communities or both cultures, I've been struck by that. And I thought that some of what I heard today in that little mini sense sort of made a lot of sense to me. So when I shifted my frame from are nanoparticles dangerous, which is the question a toxicologist would ask, and what my collaborators were asking too, how do I make them safe? I became palatable to an entirely other community who was verging on rejecting everything that was going on. And as a result, you know, the National Science Foundation and others were able to find a way to do that kind of research without having it being a raining on somebody's parade. So I don't know how you guys interpreted that, but I felt that that shift was in my mind, had very little to do with the data and everything to do with the frame. And had a huge set of implications, even though it wasn't the whole public, it was this little tiny box of people.